In July 1950, a U.S. Army photographer took a photograph. The photograph showed South Korean police and military forces executing political prisoners in a field outside the city of Daejeon. The prisoners had their hands tied behind their backs. They were kneeling at the edge of a trench. They were shot. Thousands of them. The photograph was classified. It stayed classified for 49 years. What it documented was the Bodo League Massacre, the largest mass killing in South Korean history, in which the government of President Syngman Rhee executed between 60,000 and 200,000 of its own citizens in the summer of 1950. Not enemy soldiers. Not North Korean agents. South Korean civilians. Farmers. Students. People who had joined a government-mandated re-education program and whose names were now on a list. For 40 years, the South Korean government blamed the massacre on North Korea. The U.S. Army photograph proved otherwise. American officers had been present. American officers had known. MacArthur had known. The United States has never apologized. The National Guidance League, Gungman Bodo Ryanmaing in Korean, shortened to Bodo League, was established by the Syngman Rhee government in 1949. Its stated purpose was rehabilitation and re-education. South Korea in the late 1940s had significant left-wing political activity, labor unions, peasant associations, and political parties of the left that had been active during the Japanese occupation and that had not dissolved after liberation. The Rhee government classified this political activity as potential communist subversion, and the Bodo League was the specific mechanism through which the government attempted to identify, register, and monitor those it classified as communist sympathizers. The process of joining the Bodo League was not always voluntary. Local officials pressured residents to join. Joining was presented as evidence of loyalty, a way to demonstrate that one was not a communist by voluntarily registering with the government's re-education program. People who joined were given certificates. They were told that membership would protect them from the suspicion of communist sympathy. Approximately 300,000 people joined the Bodo League. Among them were genuine left-wing activists. Among them, in much larger numbers, were farmers, students, teachers, and ordinary Koreans who had no meaningful connection to communism but whose names had appeared on a list, or who had been persuaded by local officials, or who had joined because they believed the certificate would protect their families. The certificate did not protect them. On June 25, 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. The Korean War had begun. On June 28, 3 days after the invasion, the Rhee government issued orders to the regional police and military commanders across South Korea. The orders said, execute the Bodo League members. The logic was preventive. If the North Korean army advanced and reached areas where Bodo League members were held, those members might, the government feared, collaborate with the invaders. The solution was to kill them before the North Korean army could reach them. The executions began within days. The killing that followed was not centralized in a single location. It was distributed across South Korea, in every province, in every county, in every area where Bodo League members had been registered and where the police and military could reach them before the North Korean advance. In Daejeon, the central Korean city that the North Korean army was approaching in early July, approximately 1,800 to 7,000 political prisoners were executed over several days. U.S. Army officers were present at the Daejeon executions. U.S. Army photographers documented them. The photographs were classified. In Busan, at the southeastern end of the Korean peninsula, far from the North Korean advance, Bodo League members were taken from the Busan detention center, loaded onto a ship called the Boksuwon, transported to the waters off Dima Island, and thrown into the sea. Alive. The bodies of those who drowned washed up on nearby shores for weeks afterward. In valleys across South Gyeongsang, North Gyeongsang, South Jeolla, and North Jeolla provinces, groups of prisoners were marched to remote locations, shot, and buried in mass graves that would not be discovered for decades. The total death toll has never been precisely established. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Korea, which investigated the massacre from 2005, confirmed at least 4,934 deaths through documentary evidence. The Commission's investigators stated that the total was certainly far higher. Their estimate, based on demographic analysis and the volume of testimony collected, place the death toll at between 100,000 and 200,000. Other historians have estimated between 60,000 and 200,000. The range reflects the absence of systematic documentation of what the perpetrators were doing. They were not keeping records. They were burying the evidence. If this history is new to you, subscribe to Unsolved East and hit like. New episodes every week. For 40 years, the South Korean government maintained a specific and deliberate lie. The Bodo League massacre had not happened. Or rather, what had happened at the mass graves across South Korea, the bodies that local residents had seen buried, that family members had watched their relatives march to, had been the work of North Korea. The communist invaders had committed the killings. The South Korean government had been the victim, not the perpetrator. The lie was enforced. Survivors and witnesses who knew the truth, who had seen the South Korean police and military carry out the executions, could not speak about it. Speaking about it carried the specific risk of being accused of communist sympathy under the same framework that had produced the massacre in the first place. The families of the victims could not mourn publicly. The graves could not be marked. The truth that local communities knew could not be spoken aloud in ways that reached the official record. For 40 years, the Bodo League massacre existed in the specific liminal space between community memory and official denial, known to those who had been there, erased from everything else. The American dimension of the cover-up was its own specific layer. U.S. Army officers had been present at the Taejeon executions in July 1950. This was not disputed. The presence of American personnel was documented in the photographs that the U.S. Army classified. What the American officers had done about what they witnessed, whether they had objected, whether they had reported to their superiors, whether those superiors had communicated the information to Washington, has been examined by researchers without producing a fully satisfying account. What is documented is that General Douglas MacArthur, as Commander-in-Chief of the United Nations Command in Korea, was aware that South Korean forces were executing political prisoners. He did not order them to stop. He did not publicly condemn it. He did not report it as a war crime. In 1999, the same year that the AP broke the no-gun Rhee story, AP journalists also published an investigation into the Taejeon executions, using the declassified U.S. Army photographs as primary evidence. The photographs, taken by U.S. Army personnel in July 1950 and classified for 49 years, showed South Korean security forces executing prisoners at Taejeon. They showed American officers present at the scene. The story broke in the same news cycle as No Gun Rhee. 2 massacres. The same war. The same summer. One by South Korea's forces. One by America's. Both suppressed. Both photographed. Both classified. Both broken by journalists in 1999. The specific question that the Bodo League massacre raises, the question that distinguishes it from the other cases this channel has covered, is the question of preventive killing. The logic that produced the massacre was not the logic of punishment. It was the logic of prevention. The Rhee government did not execute Bodo League members because they had done something. It executed them because of what they might do if the North Korean army reached them. The specific horror of preventive mass killing, killing people for crimes they have not committed and might never commit, is one that appears across the cases this channel has documented in different forms. In the Cultural Revolution, people were killed for what they thought. In the Indonesian Purge, people were killed for what organizations they belonged to. In the Bodo League massacre, people were killed for what they might theoretically do if circumstances changed. A farmer who had joined a government re-education program because a local official told him to was executed because he might, theoretically, have collaborated with an invading army. He was dead before the army arrived. The theoretical threat had been eliminated. The actual person had been destroyed to address it. The truth about the Bodo League massacre began to emerge in the 1990s. The specific trigger was the land. As South Korea's post-war economic development proceeded, construction and agricultural work across the country began encountering bones. Farmers plowing fields in remote valleys. Construction workers breaking ground for new development. People who had lived for decades knowing that something had happened in a specific place without being able to say what were now confronted with the specific physical evidence of what that something was. Mass graves were found in South Gyeongsang Province, in North Gyeongsang, in Jeolla, In the valleys and coastlines across the southern half of the Korean peninsula where the summer of 1950 had produced its specific geography of death. The democratization of South Korea in the late 1980s had created the political space for these discoveries to be reported and investigated. The survivors who had been forbidden to speak for 40 years began to speak. Journalists began to investigate. Academics began to research. In 2005, the South Korean government established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Korea, the same body that would also investigate the Jeju 4.3 massacre, to conduct a formal investigation into wartime human rights violations. The Commission's investigation into the Bodo League massacre confirmed the pattern of killings across South Korea. It recommended that the government issue a formal apology, establish memorials, and provide compensation to victims' families. In 2008, President Lee Myung-bak issued a formal apology on behalf of the South Korean government for the Bodo League massacre. He acknowledged that the government had killed its own citizens. He acknowledged that the cover-up had prevented justice for nearly 6 decades. No criminal prosecutions have followed. The specific officers who gave the execution orders, those who are still alive, have not been tried. The United States government has not addressed its documented presence at the Taejeon executions or its suppression of the photographic evidence. And Syngman Rhee, who ordered the massacre, who created the Bodo League that produced the lists, who gave the June 28 execution order, is commemorated in South Korea with statues, with streets named after him, and with an ongoing political debate about his legacy that mirrors the debates this channel has documented about Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan and Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines. The founding father who built the state and massacred the people. History does not offer clean answers for what to do with that. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission identified hundreds of massacre sites across South Korea. Not all of them have been excavated. The specific geography of the Bodo League massacre, distributed across every province, in valleys and coastlines and remote rural areas across the southern half of the Korean peninsula, means that the process of finding, excavating, and identifying the remains of between 60,000 and 200,000 people is a project that is still underway. Bones are still being found. The survivors, the people who were family members of the executed, who watched the South Korean police take their fathers and brothers and sons away in the summer of 1950, who spent 40 years unable to speak about it, who spent the following decades watching the government that had killed their family members hold power, receive American support, and blame the massacre on the enemy, are in their 80s and 90s. They received an apology from a South Korean president in 2008. 58 years after the massacre. The United States government has not addressed the Taejeon photographs. No American official has acknowledged the documented presence of U.S. Army personnel at South Korean executions in July 1950. The U.S. Army photograph taken in July 1950, the one that showed American officers present while South Korean forces executed political prisoners, is in the U.S. National Archives. It is available to anyone who requests it. It has produced no American apology. Syngman Rhee's statues stand. The bones are still being found. The farmers who joined a government re-education program because a local official told them to were executed for what they might theoretically have done. They have been in the ground since 1950. Some of them are still waiting to be found.